Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Claim Game. I'm Chip Merlin, and I want to thank you for joining us this evening. If you read my blog and you watch what we do, a lot of times we see that there's these huge catastrophes going on, and people have insurance claims, and quite often the insurance industry is hot to trot, get out there and help everybody, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And instead, what we find there's some systemic issues going on with the claims management, and there are complaints that happen to go on. And as I've been traveling all over the country lately, having an opportunity to frankly speak with a lot of independent adjusters, some former independent adjusters, and others, they have stories to talk to us about. And at least in our law firm, I've been very fortunate to have a person who's extraordinarily talented that we've asked to take over in the role of helping those adjusters that work for insurance companies, independent adjusters, others that are being suggested they have another story to tell and they don't know where to go to tell it to. And that person's here as our guest tonight, Stephen Bush. And so, Stephen, it's a great, for you to be a colleague of mine at the law firm. It's also great the work that you've been doing. And I first want to start off by congratulating you on all the hard work you've been doing with respect to whistleblowers.
Well, thank you, Chip. It's been an honor to be able to help uh, whistleblowers as well as policyholders all over the country. And thank you for allowing me to do it because without your support, I wouldn't be able to do what I do.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, since asking you to do that, I've also noticed you've been on, CBS 60 Minutes. You've been on with Dr. Phil. Testified before Florida lawmakers and during the last United States Senate hearings. I noticed you're sitting right behind some of the whistleblowers that were providing testimony up there, and I think you had a satisfied look on your face. Stephen, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're currently finding out there, right now, and what it's like when independent adjusters give you a phone call. And sometimes it could be company adjusters as well, regarding the issues that they're facing.
Um, the as we are in today's world, most of the stuff that we had from whistleblowers came from Hurricane Ian. But what we're seeing in today's world is a lot of just the same things. Not necessarily the changing of the estimates, but how carriers from the behind the scenes are manipulating the process. And most of the whistleblowers that I talk to now um, have information of how they're using the process, they're using engineers, and just the way they're adjusting the claim to manipulate that claim for a below deductible payment. And we're seeing a ton of that right now.
Huh. And how is it that people come? I mean, how do I mean? uh, How's the typical whistleblower give you a phone call, or you find out about them?
Well, I'm pretty easy to find. So um, most people here either know that I'm helping with the whistleblowers, um, or either someone tells them to give me a call. That's really what happens most of the time. Is I'll get a call from someone and they'll say, "Hey, so and so asked me to give you a call because I have some information I think you might be interested in," and then we talk from there. But yeah, the publicity that we've gotten from the national media has been a big help in bringing to light these issues. And I think that's very important that we do bring these issues to light and we keep them in the media because it it the insurance is the people's trust, right? So they have to do the right things, and when they're not doing the right things, we need to shine light on that, and so that one way or the other, it's exposed, and exposure brings about change, and that's what we have to continue to do.
Well, you mentioned the media, so tell me a little bit about what it was like dealing with the 60 Minutes reporters, producers, and just 60 Minutes in general when all that was going down.
Oh wow, that was hard. Uh, Anytime you're dealing with the media, it's a lot of work. Everybody thinks they just roll up in a big van and they whip out the lights and the camera, and you stand there and smile and look pretty and tell them what you know, right? That's not the way it works. I actually had to fly to New York and meet with the 60 Minutes producers in their office. And I had to bring a suitcase full of documents. And then we literally spent the whole entire afternoon with their producers going through each and every document and showing them where the fraud was, how the fraud was committed in each case. So it was very intense. It was a long process because they do a lot of interviewing to make sure that what we're telling them is accurate and that it's true. And then they have to give the other side an opportunity to respond. And in that case, the insurance carrier and the 60 Minutes story did not respond until I think after the fact. But interesting enough, um, I helped with, like you said, with Senator Josh Hawley's team, and that went on for almost 6 months before anything ever became of it. And I was working on that every single day, even on the weekends. They would call me on Sunday and say, "Hey, can you do this for us real quick? We need this. We're looking for this. Can you write a brief?" And I'm like, "It's Sunday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm already, Sunday fun day in it. And you want me to go write a brief?" So I had to, you know, put down the cocktails and go write a brief on a Sunday afternoon and shoot it over to them by 8 o'clock at night. So it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I know sometimes you'd give me a phone call about it, and I personally know how hard you worked at it, and just for myself, I said I appreciate it, but I think maybe some people don't have an idea of how much vetting goes on by, the newspaper, the media, how much vetting goes on even with the Senate, subcommittee, the staff of the subcommittee working. And I think people think that it just happens by accident, and it doesn't. And they really do try to check their sources the best they can to come up with an accurate, as accurate a story as possible. And for everybody, I appreciate everybody calling in and watching tonight. If you'd like to ask a question, there's a little up on the right hand side, at least on my thing, it's on the right hand side, a little question box. And if you click on that, you write your questions. Kathy McConnell will come in and read those to us, and we'll be able to maybe answer anybody's questions that you have. I'm certainly trying to do this interview the best I can, but I always find that the audience has a lot of great questions as well. One of the crazy ones you called me, I can still remember you called me Chip. You won't believe this. I got a phone call from Dr. Phil. I mean, how was that the experience of Dr. Phil then different than the experience you had with 60 Minutes?
A lot different, actually. Dr. Phil had in his mind the show that he wanted to piece together. The 60 Minutes piece had already aired, so I had some sense of credibility, right? So I just had to go through the interviewing process with all of the producers, and and I had to write a brief for them as well. But once I sort of had cleared the producers that I knew what I was talking about, they started really framing the show, saying, "This is what we really want to talk about." They didn't tell me in any way what to say, but they did tell me the topics and how they wanted me to approach those topics. And then, of course, I was free to do whatever I wanted and say whatever I wanted. And Dr. Phil was gracious enough to let me get a lot of it out on camera, and that was great. But the experience was probably one of the best that I've ever had on a set. I've been on quite a few sets in the past, and some haven't been that great. But Dr. Phil, his team, his staff, they were phenomenal, and he has one fantastic studio out there. So it was great. And then afterwards, I got to spend a little bit of time with Dr. Phil, uh, and he's really, really a genuinely nice guy.
He seemed to be interested a lot, what I call the soft, issues, the impact that people have going through an insurance claim that's not being taken care of and the frustration. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Um, yes, he definitely wanted to um, expose the emotional side of what happens when insurance companies don't honor their end of the deal, if you will, and how it destroys lives, how the stress that it causes, and it puts not only on the individual, but it puts on a relationship like a marriage or a partnership. The and the whole focus he had was on that, and how, uh, like in North Carolina, the floods had really affected those people there. And then he had the one couple there from California with the California fires, and so it was pretty emotional to sit there and listen to their stories. But they did keep us separated the whole time, so I didn't actually hear their stories or get to talk to them until I saw it live and in person.
Oh, okay. I think sometimes, and look, part of the audience tonight, I'm certain insurance company people are watching and independent adjusters are watching, and I'm certain that the insurance defense attorneys are watching to glean something from this. And I think what's surprising is like you and I were at recently at a conference together, and we sat, down at lunchtime with some, I think probably 20 independent adjusters, at the thing, and we were sitting at lunch with probably a dozen of them, and they were going through some stories with us and describing some of their frustrations that they had dealing with the what I would call the newer company policies. But just for what it's worth, and everybody listening in, I then gave a speech, and I, what, how do I say this the right way? But the purpose of insurance is to go out there and help people in their time of need, and it does an awful lot of good. The product does in terms of everything that we do, everything we're able to finance. Where would we be without insurance? And the role of insurance company adjusters and the independent adjusters is to get that money out of the coffers of the insurance company to the hands of the policyholders as soon as possible, so that the product works at its time of need. And I believe in the role of adjusters, and I believe in the role of independent adjusters, and that means providing them purpose in what they do, and also respecting what they do, and allowing them to go do their job. At least from, I mean, I don't, you were at the same table I was, Stephen, but what I heard, there seems to be a great deal of frustration, and I'd like you to comment about the whistleblowers feeling as if what they do out in the field is just being taken away, that they really have very little autonomy and very little decision-making power with respect to the adjustment of claims.
That's true, and that's really, I think, happened since Hurricane Ian. I think it might have started during Irma, where the insurance companies were pulling back on the adjuster's ability to, one, make decisions, or have some influence in the settlement of the claim process. But after Hurricane Ian, it was almost like the insurance companies decided, look, we're just going to take that authority away. And now, I just talked with some on Tuesday, and one of the independent adjusters that I talked to, he said, look, he said, now I feel like I am nothing more than a glorified picture taker with an adjuster's license. He said, that's all I am. I really have no control. I have no say. He says, most of the time I don't even get to write the estimate anymore. He said, I take pictures and write a little report, and that's all I do. And 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 I think that's dangerous for the insurance companies, because the claims are not adjusted fairly. They're not adjusted properly. When you have someone sitting behind a desk who's never gotten up, been to the property, put their eyes on it, and walked around and talked to the insured, now adjusting the claim and writing the estimates now. That's, to me, that's dangerous for the insurance companies. Now, I know for them, they feel like maybe they're saving money, but what are they really doing long term? And how is that affecting policyholders long term? And it it's the process is supposed to be fair, right? Insurance companies comes out, they are to take an objective view of the damages and assess those damages objectively, and then apply coverages objectively, and then to pay the claim. But that's not happening now. It doesn't happen that way.
Well,
They, they
they
want,
say, I mean, from the insurance company's viewpoint, from what I understand, they say, well, the field adjusters can come up and they do everything, but then we go back and make certain that those are more accurate than what they would be, and to correct mistakes, whether it's higher or lower. What do you have to say about that?
um, I do think that insurance companies, and I know this is going to surprise a lot of people, but I've said this publicly before. I agree that insurance companies can absolutely change the estimates, right? I think they can change them for, like you said, for things that like mistake. If the adjuster writes for a pool cage and there's no pool cage coverage, then that should come off the estimate, right? The realistic things. But listen, when you consistently take an estimate and you down it and you drop it 90+% over and over and over consistently as a pattern of practice, now there's something wrong. And then when you take that estimate and you misrepresent that estimate to the policyholder, that's even worse. And that's what's happening. They've taken it too far. It's gone too far. Yes, if there's mistakes made, you should inquire about it before you change it, then make the change. But slicing them and miraculously, Chip, they all seem to want to come just under the deductible, just under the deductible. And I had somebody ask me about that recently. What did I think about that? Well, here's what I think about it. I think it's a great practice for the insurance companies to say, "Hey, no, we paid that claim, right? Because they're admitting that there's coverage. We didn't write a check, but we paid it because it come under the deductible." So the numbers look great to the state. They look great for their shareholders, but the reality is they didn't do anything and they cheated the policyholder.
Well, I guess the other, in response to some of that, I mean, the deductibles have been getting pretty high with respect to hurricanes because they have a special hurricane deductible. So, you know, do you find that this happens a lot more in catastrophes than it does on one-offs, or is the process then in the one-offs to keep it, in the deductible as well?
Right. Well, I think the one-offs have their own issues. It does happen mostly in the catastrophes. That is true. But again, the one-offs definitely have their own set of issues and problems that we're seeing, and whistleblowers are starting to come forward more with those because we've had a little bit of a time where we haven't had as many hurricanes, had more daily claims coming in, and because of that, I think we're starting to see some things. But surprisingly enough, I get quite a few calls all the time. Um, it has slowed down a little bit over the last year, but I still get two, three, four calls a month from someone who has information that they want to share about what's going on behind the scenes in insurance companies.
Stephen, I don't know if people know what your background is, but I think the history of how you first started getting in insurance and what you did long before you became an attorney might be of some interest to people. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about how you first started insurance and what you did?
Well, believe it or not, I was a contractor. For many years, I was a contractor. I had offices in Fort Lauderdale, Houston, and Atlanta. And of course, I had some business partners. It wasn't just me. And then when the unlicensed practice of laws started to come into effect, I said, "Oops, we're going to get arrested here." Because back in those days, contractors could meet with the adjuster. We did whatever we did. It was easy. You got it negotiated out. They wrote you a check on the spot and you went on about your business. Those were back in the days when things were, I think, when it was a, a, a fairer, if you will, playing field or level playing field. Um, but when the upper laws started to come into effect, we kind of wanted out of the construction part anyway because one, our workers' compensation was through the roof. Secondly, we were having trouble dealing with workers, and it was always something. And you never could satisfy a homeowner as a contractor. No matter what you did, you couldn't get them satisfied. So we kind of looked forward to flipping over into being public adjusters, and we did that. And I was a public
So,
adjuster for
so, so
12
let me get
years.
this straight. You're a restoration contractor, and you're like, and I've heard this before. Man, I was doing restoration contract work. This is too tough. I'm going to become a public adjuster. There must be a lot of gold in becoming a public adjuster. So what year did you make that switch?
That would have been probably 2007, 2008,
All
somewhere
right.
around in there.
And so where did you
Uh,
do public adjusting out of?
Oh, same offices. We had three. We just took all three offices and changed them all over. and began a public adjusting. Right. Then I was a public adjuster for 12 years before I became an attorney. I went back and got my law degree, and it's funny. I often tell people that I feel like when I got my law degree, I stepped into my destiny. Uh, it was like all this stuff because I went back later in life, right? But it was like everything that I did beforehand was just a lead up. And so when I got my degree, it was like it was easy for me. I just stepped into it and it was there. So listen, I want to encourage you out there. If you're thinking about going back to school, no matter what it is, and you feel like you can't do it because you're a little bit older, well, so was I. And trust me, Chip will tell you, I'm not the smartest cookie in the box, but I work hard and I try, and you're never too late to do it. So I encourage you, don't wait, do it.
Well, it's quite a background. I'm certain the insurance industry people watching this are going, let's see, restoration contractor to public adjuster to policyholder attorney. Some of them might be saying three strikes and you're out from their viewpoint, Steve. And what do you think about that?
Well, they've tried to take me out, as you well know, but
Yeah.
but I'm still here. So
Well, it's really fantastic. I mean, I think the background means a lot. We have a number of people, including myself, that used to work, for insurance companies or started off doing on the insurance company side. And I think a person's background, can help out quite a bit later on as an attorney because your experience is just different. It's not just in the practice of law, and that's the only thing that you know about on one side of the law. I do think it helps to have a varied background, and I think it adds a lot to our discussion with you and our firm about that because of the prior roles that you've held. So I often talk about Javier Delgado in our firm working his way through law school as a Crawford and Company independent adjuster, and Etienne Font, who's also in our firm, was the office claims manager. So I think those backgrounds and varied backgrounds do help as attorneys and give a different perspective. Um, so, listening to you now, it doesn't sound like, are things getting any better or are they getting worse out there? I mean, what's everybody telling you? You get to hear the other side. I hear it too, but I'm gonna let you chat about it.
um, well, things have definitely changed since we brought all of this to light. Carriers are less likely now to change estimates without without officially collaborating, right? So they would say, "Oh, well, we collaborated." Well, no, you didn't. You just went and did it. You didn't ask any questions. You just changed it. So now there's a lot more collaboration going on, and what I am seeing is that independent adjusters are standing up and they're saying, "No, I'm not changing that because I feel like this is accurate, this is right, and I'm not changing it." And then what's happening is the carriers are pushing back. But like I said, it's like the claims game has changed again. So they went from changing the estimates, misrepresenting the estimate, now to on the inside figuring out how they can adjust the claim in house and pay it below the deductible. So it's just a new strategy to prevent payment.
You know, uh, can you tell me about what the concerns are of the people that come to you that say, what's going on is not right. I want to give this information and make it public because it's not right. I mean, you must have some discussion about the concerns of what's going to happen to and what the response is once that person goes public about some inside information regarding claims handling and what the insurance company's response might be. What can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, a lot of people come and they have information and they want to share it, but they don't want to come forward. They're they're afraid, to be honest with you. Uh, they're afraid of what could happen because of coming forward. Because look, they're trying to feed their families, but they know what's happening is wrong, and they're conscious. The guilt is weighing heavy on them, and sometimes they just want to talk. It's sometimes I feel like I'm just a therapist, because you would be surprised at the number of people that call me and they say, "Look, I just want to tell somebody who understands. I just want someone to hear me out." And so I listen to them, and I let them talk and hear them out. Um, but to come forward takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of honor to say, "Look, I've had enough. This is wrong, and I'm going to stand up to the system, and I'm going to fight to do what's right." Because if you think about it, look at the number of people who have claims every day, have no idea what's really going on, and they're being duped, and they have no clue. And they listen to the carrier say you have no coverage when they very well have coverage, or they say that's not damaged when in reality is it's really damaged, and needs to be replaced or repaired. And then the carrier refuses to do it. But I have people that tell me, "I've been with State Farm 20 years, 30 years. I've been with State Farm 15 years." And they believe that what State Farm tells them is the way it is. When in reality, we know State Farm, well, I'll leave it at that.
Um, I appreciate that. Do you ever find that because from the insurance company side, I sometimes hear, well, these whistleblowers have an agenda, they have a motive, what they're saying is not true. Do you ever get whistleblowers, Stephen, after you go through them and you talk to them, you don't think their story's accurate?
No, I have never had one that I didn't feel like the information that they were telling me wasn't accurate. Now, did I feel like sometimes the information they were sharing maybe wasn't necessarily wrong? Yes. And I've tried to explain to them, look, no, that's not wrong. What you're experiencing or what you're telling me is not something that um, the carrier shouldn't be doing. They should actually be doing that. But I've never had anyone that I felt like was just lying or using it to game the system in some way. And I want proof. I need proof. If you're going to blow the whistle, you've got to show me something. And and the ones that have good information, they bring it forward, and because they've been collecting it, or they have a claim that went awry where they can show, hey, this is what's really taking place. But the trend now seems to be the engineers, and I'm not sure how our audience feels about that, but I'm I've noticed this year engineers have started to um, well, we've always known that in some instances, engineering companies can be hired guns, right? Uh, but what I'm seeing now is that since we started shining a light on all of this, more people are taking a closer look at these engineers' reports, and they're just blatantly wrong. I mean, just downright wrong. And it's easy to look at it, and you can look at the photographs, and you can look at the damage itself and talk to the policyholder. And then you look at the engineer report and you go, were they even at your house, or were they at somebody else's house? How did this get to this spot?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the issue with the engineers saying things, I mean, I'll fly an engineer up who had done some work in Mississippi and testifying in Congress in a House meeting one time, and and that was right after Katrina, in 2006, and certainly Doug Quinn, um, in Superstorm Sandy had a similar, finding, and the federal government had to reopen all those cases on the flood losses, and eventually it took years, but a lot of people finally got, what they were owed because of some issues with respect to engineering reports, that were looked into. I take it you fully support Doug Quinn and the efforts of the American Policyholder Association, and why don't you tell,
Absolutely.
yeah, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about that, especially if there's some policyholders or others, public adjusters, and others that might feel that the engineering reports that are written are just bogus or not right.
Yeah, Doug does an amazing job over at the American Policyholders Association, and he has a whole team. He has investigators. He has a retired prosecutor who was the number one prosecutor in the country for fraud, all on his staff. So the American policyholders, they do a great job, and they're really there on the front lines fighting for policyholders and policyholders' rights to prevent fraud from the insurance companies. And I would encourage you, if you're not a member, you should be a member. You should support them, and you should get their literature every month, and find out for yourself what's going on. Uh, and you'll see the trends. You'll see what Doug and his team are doing to try to prevent it, and it makes you a better representative of the policyholder when you have knowledge, when you have information, right? Because knowledge is power, and you can take that and you can use it and apply it to your own claims in your own industry, your own business, no matter what it is. If it's contracting, public adjusting, even if you're an IA or an appraiser, an umpire, please consider joining the APA and supporting Doug in his efforts. Now, if you have something that comes up where you think, nope, this is not right, this engineering report's wrong, or this process that happened in this situation is wrong, and you think it might be fraud, you can report that to Doug and his team, and they'll investigate it. And then if they find it to be something credible, they'll refer it over for criminal prosecution.
I I think that's great advice. Steve, Stephen, what would you tell everybody that's a policyholder out there, and it's not an engineering report where they can report it to the American Policyholder Association, but they just don't think what happened on the adjustment or the estimate is right. And typically what I find is that a policyholder will say they had a discussion with the field adjuster. The field adjuster tells them one thing, and then the report comes back saying almost something completely different. They track down the mobile telephone number of the field adjuster, and the field adjuster will say, well, I don't know what you're looking at, but that was not my opinion and not what I wrote. That discussion goes on so long as the insurance companies allow it to go on. I think now we find that they were giving instruction to the field adjuster, have no discussion with the policyholder, or you'll get blackballed if you do that. If anybody's having that out there, we'd like to hear about that. I think that that is just absolutely wrong. The policyholder ought to be able to talk to whoever the insurance company sends out to begin with. It's a non-delegable duty, and that's the insurance company's representative, for doing so, except for National Flood, I guess, where it's by law, they're just to assist. But for everybody else, I mean, that insurance field adjuster is the insurance company's representative, period. And the insurance companies hate to say that, and that's because they want to hold things back. But if a policyholder's in that situation, Stephen, what do you suggest a policyholder do?
Well, I think they should absolutely try to reach out to the original adjuster. But in addition to that, I think they should contact the insurance company and say, hey, this is different than what I was told. Why? And ask questions. But better off, call us. We'll be happy to take a look at it and tell you what we think. And if we think that there's something there that you could maybe fight back on, because sometimes the policyholders that I've talked to who have had this happen have tried to fight back with the carriers, and the carriers shut them down and just basically stopped talking to them. And they had to get the independent back involved in the process to get properly paid. So definitely ask questions. Don't just stop. Don't say, okay, that's it, we're done. No, ask questions. Why? How come he wrote for this and you didn't? What's the differences? Why? And put them on the spot.
I think it's, to be only fair, I mean, at that luncheon that we were at recently, that we were chatting with some people, there was one independent adjuster that specifically called out an insurance company for doing the right thing, when some other independent adjusters were saying that same company wasn't acting right, and gave a number of examples about doing so, which I think is fantastic. But if what is it that you think the independent adjuster, the field adjuster wants um, to happen when there's been some change to the work product that they make? What do what are you being told all the time?
Well, that it's wrong. That that So I had one guy one time. He told me, he said, "Look," he said, "I'm tired of them changing my estimates and not asking me because I know that I wrote a proper estimate. I wrote a proper scope, and they've just completely changed it on me, and they sent it back, and they and it has, not only does it have my name on it, but the letter says, told the policyholder that this is what I wrote for when it wasn't." He said, "It's just a lie." And he said, "You know what? I'm just tired of it. I can't live knowing that what I'm doing is being misrepresented, and it's like it's my fault, and
So,
it's
so
not
let's
my
do it the
fault."
other way. Suppose the insurance company looks at the independent adjusters, the field adjuster's first estimate, and they don't think it's right after looking at the evidence. How do you think this ought to play out? What should happen?
Well, I think that they should absolutely talk with the adjuster and say, "Hey, why did you write for this?" And one of the things that independent adjusters do is they have to take photographs of the damage to justify what they're writing on the estimate. And if they have that documentation, then they should be able to use that to say, "Hey, look, this is why I wrote it. Look at picture number 35. This shows the damage. This shows why it needs to be corrected." And 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 so it should be a true collaboration.
Yeah, I know we were at I don't know if it was at that luncheon or at a RMAPIA, not a, or at a GAPIA, Georgia Association of Public Insurance Adjusters meeting where they had some Seek Now and former Ladder Assist, um, not adjusters, vendors, but they're acting like adjusters. And those people were saying, the problem is we go out there and it's going to be on a flat basis. So if it's a roof, if we write up a dollar amount or we don't write up a dollar amount, it's a flat amount. And we have to take photographs to justify if we're writing for an amount, which takes more time. So sometimes, to be quite frank with you, you have to get 8 of these done or 6 of them done a day. And I'm going to get paid the same amount of money. It's almost to my financial benefit not to write anything extra because I have to take more photographs, document. It takes more time up. I'm going to get paid the same no matter what because it's a flat rate type of deal. I mean, what do you say about that?
Well, that's morals. Where are your morals? Where are your ethics? Where is your sense of doing what's right, no matter what, right? If you got a job to do, you ought to do it the right way, and you ought to do it that way every time. And I would. I've often said I don't know how some of these people go to bed at night and sleep, knowing what they've done in the position that they put some of these policyholders in. It's devastating to people who depend on this to protect their property, their home, their sanctuary, right? Their shelter, their number one investment. And when they have an issue, insurance should step up, and the process should function to be fair and honest. And I'm not saying that we should do one thing or pay a policyholder one penny more than what they're deserved, but the process itself should at least be fair, and it should be an honest process. And it's no longer an honest process. It's a process now where the insurance companies pay as little as they can, and then the policyholder side fight tooth and nail any way they can fight to try to get the insurance company to move any at all, to where they finally come to some type of an agreement. And the only one that gets hurt is the policyholder. And that's not right. The policyholder should come first all the time. In every situation, we should be thinking about the policyholder and what's best and what's right, no matter what side we're on.
Oh, I agree with that. As a matter of fact, I gave a speech this week, and I don't think anybody disagreed with it. I've yet to have anybody disagree. Like, what's a fair appraisal award? What's the right appraisal award? It should ethically reflect the full amount of money which the policyholder is entitled to. Period. I'm not saying it's overpayment, but it's not definitely underpayment either. And it shouldn't be treated as a gain to see how little amount we have to pay rather than taking care of the policyholder. It's the full amount somebody owes the policyholder, period. And people have legitimate difference of opinion. I want to push you a little bit though on your last response. I mean, are you saying the entire industry is crooked, or it almost come across that way, Stephen? I'm going to be frank with you because I don't think that, but I'm curious to see what your view might be. We have difference of opinion within our own law firm. That's fair.
Well, maybe I'm getting a little jaded. I don't know from what I see all the time, but um, uh, no, like I do see some claims that get paid fairly, right? Uh, However, they're very few, but I do see some that get paid fairly, and I do
Do you
see.
think that's because we only see do you think that's because we only see the problem ones afterwards and we don't see all the ones that get taken care of fairly? I mean,
Yeah, that very well could be it. You're right, but I do think that as a whole, the industry is a lot more, and I don't want to say crooked. That's a bad word. Um, Contentious. We'll say that is a lot more contentious now than it has ever been since I've been involved, and I've been in it since 2004. Uh, and you've been in it even longer than that. But the process and it seems like every year it gets harder and harder and harder. It gets harder to get good claims paid. It gets harder to get good claims paid fairly, and gets harder because the insurance companies continue to write out coverages while continuing to raise rates. These policies now that they've just been stripped of coverage.
yeah, I think, it's the protection gap is getting huge in policies, and it's almost raised the bottom because you can start changing the small wording, out there, and writing out smoke or wildfire particulate, limiting it to $5,000. That's not doing any policyholder any good. When you start limiting water damage to a certain, we pay for it, but we'll pay for 2,500 or 5,000. Or on page 23 of 26, I think it was Peninsula. Oh, we'll pay for up to extra coverage for up to $5,000 for water mitigation if you call us first to get permission to do it. Well, at 10 o'clock at night when the water's falling through your roof, you aren't reading on page 23 of 26. You're getting the water mitigation guys out there right away to go do it. Then to later on find, that you have this limitation. Give me a break. I'd agree with you. I think it makes it extraordinarily frustrating that there's coverages being written out. And people might say, well, they can do that, but where's the insurance regulators on that? Because nobody can read all their policies. They're not given to them in advance. They don't
Yeah.
know that these small little changes in coverage mean a lot. And I know from our side, we hear the frustration that's really coming to a crescendo. I think some of that crescendo showed up in Washington, D.C. What was that like to be sitting in the background while all that was going on and watching Holly start to really get into two of the most major insurance companies historically in the United States, State Farm and Allstate?
Well, it was really funny because the first part of the hearing, he was so gracious and so empathetic, right, to these policyholders, and he was just very kind and gentle and very low key in his tone. But when they took them out and they brought State Farm and Allstate in, you could feel the tension in the room change, and it got so tight in there. It was the atmosphere just like it just changed, and and they had all their suits with them, and I think he mentioned that. So uh, both Allstate and State Farm, I bet they had 10 or 12 attorneys each there sitting behind them. And if you watch the video, you'll see all their attorneys there. And so when they first came in, before we started, the hearing, boy, they were just whispering back and forth. They were running up there talking to the two gentlemen that were going to testify, and uh, and then when Holly came back in the room, you could see a difference in his face, in his attitude. And I leaned over to John and I said, "This is going to be good." And sure enough, boy, when he lit in. So he really lit into the Allstate guy. The State Farm guy played it perfectly, if you ask me, because he got up and he apologized. And he told the guy that he was going to make it right. Where the Allstate guy sat there and kept fighting that no, we did what was right, we did what was right, knowing all along that they didn't do what was right. But talk about limiting coverages and what actually happened in that case. Their policy says that they only owe for the damaged portion. They don't owe for repair. But yet, this policyholder has a replacement cost policy. So she's paying for replacement costs, but they only paid her for the 20 damaged shingles or what, and three damaged pieces of siding that she had, saying that that was all that they owed her. And and Holly just wasn't having it. He expected them to do more and to step up, and they had an opportunity at that hearing to do just that. And the poor Allstate guy, he didn't do it, and
Well,
Holly crushed it.
do you and do you foresee that there's going to be more federal hearings regarding this, or what's going to happen with all of this?
Well, I just wrote well, let me rephrase that. Larry Bass wrote for me a memo that that I just submitted to them, and there is. But listen, if anybody out there is working in Missouri, there's some good opportunity in Missouri to use Missouri for some change. Uh, so please reach out to us in Missouri, or if you know anyone who's working in Missouri, please reach out because they have asked me to begin looking at Missouri. But yeah, they're very interested in continuing this. So what was funny to me was we had Senator Holly on the Republican side and Senator Kim on the Democratic side, but the two of them really came together on this issue. And Kim was just as concerned about this as Holly, and I think Kim did. Holly's staff didn't notify Kim's staff of the deep details until the hearing. And so when Kim got there and found out and heard all this, he was really, I don't want to say upset, but he was very concerned about what he was hearing. And he wants to continue this too, I believe.
So what do you think, is going to happen in Florida, Steve? And I know you testified in front of the legislature. It seemed to be at one point in time last year, at the last legislative session, it started coming out that some of the studies regarding the insurance companies, executives' compensation, and the third-party, management companies were really starting to be, questioned. And then all of a sudden, kind of crickets. What do you think that there's going to be any positive action in the state of Florida, or what?
I do think that the upcoming leadership does offer some opportunity for us to have some change if we can get it past the Senate and Governor DeSantis to sign it. Uh, but if you want my honest, really truthful opinion, I'll be happy to give it to you.
Well,
Uh,
let's hear it, Stephen. Come on. That's what people are watching. Everybody wants to know what your honest opinion is. Let's go.
I don't think we're going to get one thing done until DeSantis is out and we get somebody else in. Um, they have absolutely destroyed the insurance market in Florida. Uh, they have making it so that policyholders have no remedies for bad behavior in Florida, and the insurance companies know this, and because of that, they are acting and running amok, and because there's nothing that you can do that I can do, or that the Office of Insurance Regulation will do, or DFS will do to an insurance company for mishandling claims. They just do whatever they want to do now, and it's terrible. Even the court system in Florida has gotten to be terrible. the judges and citizens. Just look at what's going on with citizens and the DOA hearings. You and I have been asked to investigate that and to see if we can help make some change there. And I called you when I was driving back from Fort Myers, and I was like, Chip, you're never going to believe what I just found out. You're never going to believe what I just got. I was on a Zoom call with 30 other attorneys, and the information that came out of that Zoom call with citizens, I could not believe what I was hearing. And 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 I'm going to be working with your blessing and your help to try to make some changes in the legislature this year and bringing some light to what's going on. But eventually, something has to happen when we have the next really big disaster in Florida, and people don't get paid. We're going to have the citizens of Florida rise up and push our legislators and our leaders to make some real change and bring that pendulum back to the middle. Now, I'm not saying we didn't have problems, because we did. Should there have been some changes? There should have, but we went way too far, and the policyholders in Florida are the ones that are suffering.
Well, I mean, I know we have to wrap up before long, but for everybody who might not be aware of this in Florida, the Florida Citizens Property Insurance, which is the insurer of last resort in the state of Florida, and it's a quasi-governmental entity, went out and did something unthinkable. They petitioned the Florida legislature to start up their own judiciary. No joke. They're going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars that had to get approved so they could buy their own judges in an arbitration proceeding or an administrative proceeding known as these DOA proceedings. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out, suppose Chip Merlin could go out and buy all of his judges in advance, and they'd only be hired so long as Chip Merlin says they ought to keep getting hired. I bet you I might win a lot of cases that way, right? Well, certainly that's what's happening with citizens. And I've called it a despicable act that's being approved by the Florida legislature and Governor DeSantis. And for what it's worth, it's not just Chip Merlin saying it. The #1 Republican in the country right now, Donald Trump, said that Ron DeSantis is in with the globalist insurers. That's not me saying it. That's the president of the USA talking about Ron DeSantis. And so that's what we're facing in Florida right now. Now, I bet you every insurance company, Stephen, in the United States would love to have their own bought and paid for judges somewhere ruling on their cases. But we have that in Florida when it comes to citizens, and they have these DOA things. So I'm glad you mentioned that. It's and anybody has any inside information, the man that you can give a phone call on that is sitting right there. I'm talking to him right now. So you don't think you don't even think we're gonna be able to get rid of that anytime soon, I take it?
No, actually, I'm kind of encouraged that listen, the only way to bring about change is to shine some light on it. So we're going to have to get some media. There's already been a few articles written, but listen, that information that I shared with you the other day, that's bombshell stuff. That's stuff that's going to be really that I think that will start to rattle some cages. And once we start rattling some cages, people will start asking questions. And we have the data, we have the documents, we have the information to share, and then I think we'll start to see some things change. Now, so I'm just an optimist, but I'm optimistic that we can get some change in citizens.
Well, I'm always optimistic, and I tell people that we need all the inside information we can get, because if we can get it to the media, they seem to publish it, and that's the only thing that the politicians seem to pay attention to is what's going to happen when the media gets a hold of it, because then the cat's out of the bag, and the citizens who vote, know what the gig is. I'm happy that you feel a little bit optimistic about that, but we'll see. I don't know how much I am. So how much longer is this going to keep going this way, Stephen? Do you think we're going to get any favorable laws passed anywhere? For me, I've said I don't think this is going to go anywhere until we have more people saying lawyers are bad and lawsuits are bad. Well, certainly policyholder lawyers are bringing bad faith lawsuits against insurance companies that are wrongfully acting and harming their policyholders. Those insurance companies must think it's bad, but what's going to take to make the change? Seriously.
Well, like I
I
said,
got a
in Florida,
thunderstorm going on here. Hold on. Stephen, you can answer that, and I'll be right back. I got to close this. The thunderstorm just blew open my door.
so I think that for it to change in Florida, we're going to need a really big, bad hurricane that's going to do a lot of damage. Now that's terrible, and I certainly don't wish that on anybody. But that's what's going to bring about change when policyholders say, "Listen, my house has been destroyed. I have no coverage, and they're not paying, and they're not doing what they should be doing based upon the laws that are put in place to settle my claim." And so there's going to have to be some huge pushback, but it's going to have to come from the citizens. But Chip, you mentioned that, and I'm fortunate enough to get to know what's going on all across the country, and we saw those in Nebraska, seeing some favorable law, believe it or not, in Indiana. Other states like Texas, what the carriers are just using their lobbyists to push what happened in Florida in other states by saying, "Hey, look, this needs to change because what it happened in Florida. Here's the way it's happening. You need to change it for here." And they're looking at us in Florida, and I keep telling the people that I talk to is you can't do that because it didn't work, and it's not working. And so hopefully, so is it going to go on? It's going to go on. I'm afraid, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I think eventually there will be some change that'll have to come because otherwise these insurance policies are nothing more than a fire policy. That's all they are. And you better
Well,
hope you don't have any soot and ash.
I do think it's not just the independent adjusters that come forward and some others. I would suggest that policyholders coming forward, policyholders telling their story to legislators. I I think they're every bit as and maybe the most effective people of all at telling their story about what happened, and then having legislators that are really involved follow up. Well, I'd like you
Yeah,
to make a comment about that, Stephen.
yeah. I was say, yeah, we have to stand up. We have to speak out because we can't have change and affect change if everybody sits back and just takes it. Uh, and there's ways to do it where you don't have to come out if you don't want to. But we really do need people to step up and to say, "Hey, look, this is wrong, and we need it to stop," because ultimately that single mom who's just trying to pay the bills and keep the house so she can keep shelter for her family, or we see the 86-year-old widow who's just trying to make it and she's confused and doesn't understand the process because they're manipulating her, or that retired couple that's living paycheck to paycheck, just again trying to maintain and hold on to their shelter, their sanctuary, their safe place, and then they're getting abused by the process, and we just can't let that happen. We have to stand up, you know, and most policyholders are ignorant to the process. They've never had a claim, or if they have had a claim, um, it it went smoothly, and now they have one and they don't understand why you're not paying me this time. So there's all kinds of different things, but we have to stand up. We have to speak out.
Well, I think that's important, and that's probably one of the most important things you said right there. Truth and honesty never come out unless people have enough courage to say truthfully what's going on. I believe in the efforts that you're leading, Stephen. I believe in your encouragement to policyholders, to adjusters, to whistleblowers, to come out and tell the truth about their story and do so in a public way, because I do believe that media pressure starts political pressure, which then starts insurance companies having to answer to what they're doing. And if you can't hold people accountable for wrongful acts, then there's just no accountability whatsoever. There's no need for laws. There is no consumer protection. So I applaud everything that you do. I'm very happy that you decided to hitch your start of this wagon, with us and work with other people that are similarly. We have the same culture. We just want to help policyholders. That's what our law firm's about. We encourage other attorneys to do so and do it hand in hand with us all over the country, because if we don't, there will be no voice, and we need to support Doug Quinn and his efforts of fighting fraud and wrong engineering reports, Amy Bach with United Policyholders, and make certain that when the media calls on this, that we're able to take some time and help them as well, get the evidence they need to the extent it exists, to show these wrongful practices that do go on. So I
Tim,
applaud you.
we got a question.
Oh, we got a question. I didn't know we had a question. What's the question?
Yeah, it says, did anyone from the insurers ever try to reach out to you or give you a hard time? Yes, and I had 3 death threats. So yes, and not only that, I was told that there was an investigator who was investigating my background and had done so much as even called some of my high school friends. So they've been digging, looking, trying their best, but hey, it is what it is.
Yeah, sometimes, this doesn't come without, and I say it takes courage, because the other side will reach back out, make all kinds of threats, file slap lawsuits that we haven't gotten into, and do other things. The Rigby sisters, who eventually had a huge amount that was eventually paid for by State Farm, they would be threatened with all kinds of things after they came out talking about the engineering reports, which were wrongly procured after Hurricane Katrina. So
Yeah.
that kind of comes with the territory.
Jim, here's one for you. Since insurance is mostly regulated by the states, how can engineers be held to account if they are parties to fraudulent reports?
Well, I think there's 2 ways that works. So if you think about it, if the insurance industry and the insurance companies hiring engineering companies were really concerned about preventing these wrongful reports, and they've got to be concerned about that. They're paying hundreds of millions of dollars to some of these engineering companies. It is extraordinarily profitable to be selected by an insurance company or an independent adjustment firm and give all these assignments. And there's huge problems with respect to potential bias. And I've had engineers tell me, Chip, can't represent you on this. It's a first party claim. If we do, we'll get blackballed, just point blank. We can do it on a third party claim, but we can't do it on a first party claim. And this goes on. People get concerned. And when you see, what Doug Quinn, his personal involvement, it had to do with business development people in engineering firms changing engineer reports. Those are the allegations and things that go on. So there's a huge amount of money and a huge amount of concern that insurance industry should have. If their concern is to take care of their customer, they should be equally concerned that these engineering companies have in their mind perceived that they're going to get gold stars by giving reports that are going to reduce the amount of claim. And we see this a lot in litigation. That's absolutely wrong. And so the insurance industry can really, if they had people that were trying to ferret out fraud, look for that, looking for, I would suggest, wrongful severity reduction and wrongful leakage, concerns, they would have programs and processes that would prevent it. And I don't see it. Instead, the whole thing seems to be, we're concerned about leakage, and you got to have an engineer to go out there, use these engineers. There's even we've got litigation going on right now where an insurance, claim organization called their engineering firm a quote partner and gave them an award. Partners got awards who did really, really well. That's going on as well. So that's from one side. I think that the work of Doug Quinn of trying to show all the same just repeated stuff and all the engineering reports that are out there, is excellent. We've gotten, I talked about it on LinkedIn, and we're just getting done on some of the statistics, but we had some adjuster say that it's been a decade since he's seen a favorable engineering report on behalf of a policyholder. And so, well, I'll see it when I can believe it. And the guy sent it to us. And so we're going through and vetting all that and just finishing up the vetting on it. And it might have been for 20 years, not just 10. So, I think, how do you stop it? You tell the insurance, you ask what the insurance industry is doing. You ask the regulators, ask the insurance industry what they're doing to prevent this from happening and to make certain it's not happening. A good audit committee with the insurance company would make certain they're not ripping off their customers. And the second thing is to actually actively get these engineering reports and start doing what Doug, Quinn is doing. You should have market conduct studies that are, digging into these engineering reports, but we don't see that type of market conduct study being done by the industry. If that answers the question. Is there anything else before we finish up? I try to keep this to an hour. And for everybody else, you can tune in. I think this will all be in tomorrow for YouTube, and you go to YouTube and you can see the others. This is the 4th episode that we've got. Stephen Bush's is going to be the 4th, but we've got 3 others that have gone on with a lot of discussions on this and these types of issues that are tough issues out there. And we're not afraid to tackle them here in this discussion. Is there anything else, Stephen?
I don't think so. I think we got it. Everybody keep fighting the good fight and stay honest.
All right. Stay honest. Fight the good fight. Till next time from Claim Game, thank you very much, Stephen Bush. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chip. Good night.